Let's learn how to put a middle class or an upper class wardrobe together for the 1840s. Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin and I am a living historian who educates other living historians by teaching old-fashioned sewing skills and copying originals. If you are a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back, and if you are new here, hi, welcome. I'm so glad you decided to join us today. I no longer work in the museum setting, but I do keep a small collection of original garments to study from, and I have friends with vast collections that allow me to study as well, so I'm able to share historic techniques for your reproduction clothing. We are continuing our deep dive into the 1840s today, so we have already discussed resources for primary research, especially those online that are accessible to everyone. We discussed how to pick fabric for our mid to late 1840s time frame. We discussed patterns. We talked about how to make a dress using an original to show all the steps. And so now that we have a dress, we are now into the section where we are learning about how to put together an outfit. So last month we talked about how to look poor or working class, and I was going to do 3 videos for this. I was going to do, working class, middle class, and upper class. But the more I looked at it, I decided that most people are working class, so I think that needed its own video. However, middle and upper class are usually only distinguished by accessories and the quality of fabric, but a lot of the other things don't change. So I figured that we could just put them together, and then in the space, I think we'll just make another dress and show a different style of dress instead of having 3 videos on how to put together an outfit. Especially because the dress we looked at last time was a back opening dress, and I figured that maybe doing a front opening dress would be very helpful to people, because I know a lot of people like to do the front opening dresses, which weren't as popular in the 1840s, but definitely did exist. And there are some fitting and patterning differences between front and back closing bodices. So I figured it would just be more useful to everyone if I did 2 dress videos and then 2 making an outfit videos. So let's talk about looking like we have some money. We're in an era where simplicity is really the name of the game. It's actually a little bit difficult to look like you have money. So we're going to talk about how do you dress up, so to speak, your outfit enough to read as wealthy. It can be quite the complicated topic, actually, and it's not always the easiest to do. Figuring out where your character falls on the social scale can be rather difficult. You need to look at what that person or their father or their husband or whatever owned, how much money was being brought in, etc. And you also need to know where they were located, because $12 in California doesn't buy you nearly as much as $12 in, say, Texas. And you can't always rely on things like censuses just to tell you professions and decide who was rich and who wasn't. We discussed last month about doctors. We think of doctors today as being very wealthy. And yes, a doctor who caters, I think the example we used last time was a doctor who, elite Bostonians over in the north, is going to have a very different wardrobe, a very different financial situation than a country doctor way over in Kansas who maybe takes chickens as payment for services. Both doctors, again, have the same profession, but their financial situations are going to look very different. They're going to have very different household incomes and different clothing. And I also spoke about this last night, but just because you're a farmer doesn't mean that you're poor. We talked about the Gross family who had 60,000 acres of land, who are the wealthiest people in Texas, and yet they were listed on the census as farmers. So it really is going to be up to you to deep dive into your area and fully study your chosen profession and your time frame and your area. And even then, not all wealthy people chose to dress crazy wealthy. Some preferred more subdued design choices. Everything should be documented, so let's go ahead and get started. Just like last month, the bulk of this video is going to be looking at period images and getting an idea of what to look for. So I found basically 15 images from the 1844 to 1851 time frame. It can actually be hard to find images of documented wealthier people who aren't royalty, and of course I live in America, so I need to be able to find a way to look wealthy without being royalty. So I've tried to pick images of people doing leisure activities to kind of show they had some downtime, or nicely put together, that sort of thing. Picnicking, so people who had free time and time to socialize. So let's see what we can see. This will be one of our picnic images. This is actually, I really like this image. And we have a lot of young ladies in this one. So we have, let's start from the left. We have the lady in the blue, one-piece blue dress, long waist, looks like it comes to a V. Looks sort of like a very full bodice. She has a kerchief, a pink kerchief on, and it looks like a jacket or a mantle in like a maroon color. And it looks like she's braiding flowers, which is kind of cool. The lady sitting down next to her is a little bit younger. She has her hair all the way down, so not put up like the lady before. And it looks like she has some flowers in her hair as well. She's wearing, could be a one-piece dress, probably is a one-piece dress of gold. Her neckline is lower. We see like a chemisette underneath from that V collar, and she has the typical very straight sleeves and little cap sleeves. The lady in blue, I didn't notice this before. She has cuffs on her sleeve. But going back to the lady in yellow, she has a shawl or a mantle wrapped around her that is bright red. The two younger girls, it's very hard to see detail on, but further in the back, we have a lady in a very white sheer dress. You can kind of just see how the painter chose to illustrate the sheerness of her fabric. And she has a little tiny shawl over top in red and green. And she has a straw bonnet. You can kind of see it on the ground. She's touching it. And she has flowers all over her hair. And the lady in the back, it's very hard to see. She's wearing a sheer shirred bonnet. And it looks like it's pink on the inside, so it could be a sunbonnet. Part of me thinks it is. It could be a sunbonnet, but it's likely a cottage bonnet. And you can't really see much detail about her dress other than it's maybe an orange or gold, and she has a white collar. And next we have a whole family, so we're just going to look at the mother. This is very early 1850s, so it looks like we have a very nice, likely silk given the sheen dress, very full. She has the funnel sleeves that are a little bit open, and her collar and undersleeves are lace. Lace is a great way to show wealth, because it can be very expensive in this time period. Everything, again, has to be hand done. This is before even machine embroideries come about, we're not too far from the machine embroidery era, but that is not this era. And even though her dress looks very subdued, I mean, it's a brown silk, it has a little bit of trim around the sleeves, not much. It's probably silk ribbon or velvet ribbon. But the lace definitely does elevate her outfit. Next one, we have a lot to talk about. This is another picnic scene. So let's start. It's very hard to see some of the details in the back, but overall we're seeing one-piece dresses, some open necklines, but they're not as open as they were, let's say, in last month's video. And they're not really covered with kerchiefs. So when we see an open neckline, we're seeing something white underneath, which is going to be a chemisette. And we're seeing very fashionable straight sleeves. The first one we see detail on is this lady in salmon in the front. She has a beautiful little cap sleeve on hers. It looks almost similar to the cap sleeve on my original. Long waist, very typical. And we see her beautiful hairstyle. I think the next lady on the very back of the table, one-piece dress, looks like she's wearing a chemisette. She has a cottage bonnet, likely of straw. And we have the older lady who's holding the baby. She has a cap on. She's the only one who's wearing a cap in the whole painting, as far as I can tell. And just based on what we can see, it's a one-piece dress, but the ties on her are for the cap, so I don't see what's going on with her neckline, but it does look like a very high neckline. The three ladies in the back, so we have two of them have stolen men's hats. They're playing with some of the men, flirting with them likely, given their age. One of them's even dangling something, like a leaf or something, over the guy with a fiddle. And she's wearing a striped dress, a very nice shiny striped dress that could be a silk. Her neckline is lower, which would not be unusual for a younger lady, but she is still filled it in with a sheer chemisette. And she also has lace undersleeves underneath. So her sleeves are not as tight as, say, the lady in salmon's. They're a little bit looser, so you do have some sleeve options. I know in the 1840s it can look like you don't have any sleeve options, but you do. Your options are extremely tight, moderately tight, and funnel. Those are basically the sleeve options. Now you do have bishop sleeves and all of that, but not going to see as much of those with the fashionable outfits. But still, her bodice, she has a long waist, she has a full bodice, but again, because she has those because she has that little bit of an open sleeve, she can wear an undersleeve, and it looks like hers are likely of net. They're very sheer, but I'm going to guess it's likely net. Behind her, we have the lady in pink. She is wearing a low-necked gown that has a chemisette underneath that is extremely sheer. But you kind of tell with the collar. She is playing with a man's hat, probably one of the men over closer to them. She has, again, long sleeves. She has a cap sleeve as well that looks like there might be a ruffle on that. And she's a very full bodice, and also she has some tucks in her skirt, which would be typical for her age. And the final lady in back is a dark green dress, a little cap sleeve. Looks like there's some trim on that, likely black, likely velvet ribbon. Very tight sleeves, so no undersleeve. She has on a lovely straw bonnet with a very long curtain. I don't know if I've ever seen a curtain that long on an actual bonnet. That's not a sunbonnet, like a fashion bonnet. So that's very interesting. But we are still seeing the trend of bonnets not matching our outfits. So things coordinate, not match. This next one is earlier. So we have, we're just going to look at the lady. Lovely pink dress, likely silk. She has on over it a pelerine is what I would call that. That is sheer, likely lace. Has some ribbon in the front that's tying it closed. Her sleeves are very tight up to the elbow, and they have a little bit of ruffles. It's an unusual sleeve type. I'm not going to say I've never seen it before, but it is a little bit more unusual. But it does open to reveal some very fine sheer undersleeves. And it looks like she has in her hand, I'm going to guess that's a mantle because it looks like it has a lining. And she has a straw bonnet as well with pink. So that's the most matching that we've seen, but you can clearly see they're not the same color pink at all. They're two completely different shades of pink. And she has lots of different colors in there with the orange ribbon, with the darker mantle, with the orange straw. So her outfit matching, it's just coordinating. I think she may have a favorite color of pink. All right, this next lady is a lovely white dress, or could be off-white. And I'm interested to see what's going on in her neckline. It looks like she has a neck bow on underneath, but then there's, of course, her bonnet bow. We see another straw bonnet. Love seeing the straw bonnets. It looks like there's a blue on the inside, some trim over top, maybe a feather or something on her right side, and a short little beautiful sky blue bow. She has what I would call a mantle, and it is very bright pink. Likely that is going to be silk, because a lot of these mantles are silk. She has gloves on. Looks like some bracelets, buff colored gloves on. And it looks like she has a cuff on her dress, or on the sleeve of her dress. But again, very tight sleeves. I don't think that's more of a cap sleeve. I think it's just the fullness of the bodice over top of her shoulder. And she has a very lovely little parasol. Looks like it has some stripes on the bottom. And the detail in it reminds me a lot of some of my parasols, my originals, with mother of pearl inlay. So I'm wondering if that's what we're seeing going on here. But the finial is not white, so it's not bone or ivory. I have one that's metal. That could be what's going on here. And I just love the ruffles on her skirt. It's different to see that, because again, the 1840s was mostly about simplicity. So it's nice to see a little detail on the skirt. All right, this next lady looks like she has a silk brocade. Very lovely fabric. She has pleats all the way down it. And you can kind of see her chemisette. Looks like it's very nice embroidery. This is white work. What kind of white work? It's just general white work as far as I can tell. But it's a nice chemisette with a collar. She has a very fine cap. You can see her hair underneath, all trimmed in blue, with a little necktie as well that is also blue, but a different color blue than the dress. I'm wondering if this dress is actually a shot silk. Can you see the parts of it that look golden? That to me says shot silk. Gold on blue for shot silk or iridescent silk or changeable silk. There's lots of different terms for it. It was a very popular color combination. Even I found medieval paintings that were shot silk with gold and blues. So it's a very popular combination. I myself had at one time a gold and blue shot silk dress. I've sold it. She has some trim. It looks like a braid trim in Van Dyke points or chevrons, as we would probably say now. Her dress is a back closing dress, and it looks like the front of it is opened up a little bit more, just so you can see more of that chemisette. It's a lovely detail. And just you can tell by the way the painter has worked this, there's piping down the center front, which is very typical. There's also piping around the waistline. Can't really tell what else is going on, but it would be typical also to have piping on the shoulder seam. It's just very hard to see that sort of thing in painting. And then she has a lovely shawl that is embroidered. This is probably what the period would call muslin. Their muslin is not our muslin. Their muslin was a lot more like a cotton organdy. So very fine, very sheer. And this one is very beautifully embroidered on all of the edges, and then it looks like the one edge at least is very heavily embroidered. And she also has some undersleeves going on. Looks like they're a lace, not necessarily as opaque as the white work of the chemisette and also the shawl, but it does look like a lace. And she has a ring on her finger. This one has a couple of ladies. Let's start with the lady sitting down. We have a very lovely open straw work bonnet. She is wearing very likely a silk dress, and that is a sheer mantle over top. So this is a time period where it was very normal to go out with a wrap on, even in the summer, which sounds very strange to us to have a wrap on, but they have wraps that are just like this for summer purposes. They are extremely fine and sheer. I mean, you can barely tell that thing is on her. If there wasn't the embroidery on that mantle, I don't know if we'd actually really be able to tell where the mantle ended and the dress began, because you can see a lot of detail on her bodice even through that mantle. It's a very fine embroidered mantle. It can be made of net, it can be made of any number of very fine cottons, or even very fine silks. Likely it's going to be a cotton though, especially for summer because it is cooler. And I love we get to see her little slipper poking out, little square toe. The lady in white is doing up her hair. She has a ruffled collar on, ruffles on the edge of her sleeves, but no undersleeves. She has bracelets, one on either wrist. Looks like they are different though. She has a lovely green paisley shawl with a lovely border detail. Pointed waistline, we're going to see that a lot in the 1840s. And it looks like two little ruffles. Her dress appears to be sheer, because if you look over by her shoes, you can see her shoe underneath underneath part of the skirt, which means the upper fabric is very sheer. She either has the skirt very well lined, which is where we get that more opaqueness, or she's wearing a bodice petticoat underneath that very sheer dress. But that's a very nice, lovely sheer dress with a very lovely embroidered detail on the bottom, even with the little scallops on the edge. I love scallops. I'm a sucker for scallops, so love seeing that. Lady in the back is very hard to see. She has on a silk bonnet, not a straw one. She's not dressed up as nicely as the other ladies, I don't think. And then she has on a dark colored dress, and it looks like a plaid shawl. Always love seeing the patterns in paintings. They don't often show them. They often like to paint solid dresses. So it's really nice when we get to see the patterns. All right, this next lady, this actually may be a wrapper, and it looks like it's almost late 1830s except for her hair. We have a beautiful cap. You can see how fine and just sheer that fabric is, with lavender silk ribbons, one on either side. She has on, again, what I'm going to say is a wrapper, mostly because underneath that book there's a ruffle, which tells me that this whole thing opens up, covered by that red shawl or scarf that she has going on her neck. A little bit of a higher waistline. That's not unusual for very early 40s. Before a wrapper, you would still see that sort of thing even into the 40s, so that's not super unusual. That little cape-like thing on the wrappers is also very typical in the 1830s and 1840s. So, well, she does have some very nice poofy bishop sleeves, which is somewhat unusual. Our next lady is wearing blue. Again, this one might be shot with gold. You can just see the different hues as the light hits her. But she's very nicely dressed up with her beautiful hairstyle. She has a little pink neck bow going on, high neck again. You can kind of see how her back shoulder line isn't exactly on her shoulder line. It's usually set back an inch or so. It's very nice to be able to see that. Beautiful white work collar. Looks like lace cuffs on her dress. Again, very simple, but it's the fabric itself and the little details of lace and beautifully embroidered white work that really sets this apart as being a little bit more wealthy. This next lady is a little bit older. I love her hair. That intricate braiding that they would do is just so fascinating to me. Looks like she has earrings on. They look like hoops to me a little bit. And then you can see her chemisette. Her chemisette is tucked, and then there is a lace collar over top, and she has a necktie that goes all the way around her neck. That is a beautiful pink silk ribbon, and there's a brooch on it as well. And it actually looks very similar to a lot of hair brooches that I've seen. So hair would be put inside that brooch. And it's a very common shape regardless of this time period, but it is nice to see that. Beautiful green dress. Again, you can see how the pointed neckline and the pleats and the fullness of the bodice, and her very straight sleeves, again with lace cuffs, which really do elevate this. She has a ring on her finger as well. This one has a more open neckline, probably the most open neckline we've seen so far, but she has a chemisette underneath with a little ruffled collar. She has on a black mantle over top. Looks like it has a lot of black lace on it, which would really elevate this outfit. See a gold bracelet on one arm. You can't see what's going on the other arm. But other than that, you see the V of her waistline, her full skirt, very plain skirt, again, likely silk, beautiful maroonish color. And overall, a very nice outfit. Again, her hair is not covered. We talked about this in the last video, but it is not unusual to see women with their hair uncovered. This is not where you had to have your hair covered, especially indoors. Now, you saw in the picnicking, not a lot of the ladies had their hair covered. They just had their bonnets with them because they were resting, and you can always take your bonnet off if you're resting outside, especially under a tree, somewhere that's going to be a little bit more shaded. But on the interior, you really don't have to wear a cap or anything. There is a bonnet on the table side, but I'm wondering if that's the little girl's. It looks a little bit small to be the mother's. This next one's another one that's likely silk or wool. Beautiful little cap trimmed in pink, and then she has a lace collar, very nice lace collar, and with little lace detail at her cuffs as well. It's not a full cuff, it's like a little lace ruffles, what I would call that. She has a pink silk necktie as well, or neck bow. Very full bodice with a V waist, full skirt. She has a black silk mantle over top. Black is a great color for accessories if you're middle class. I found that sometimes it is cheaper than other colors. Also, a lot of the advice columns do say that if a lady could only have a silk dress, she should have it made in black. And then once that dress is worn out, you can cut it down to accessories that'll go with any of her dress, that will go with any of your other dresses. Good. So I would say this is a very good middle class. See the white work at the collar. You see very plain. So it could be wool or silk dress, and that black silk mantle is very nice. All right, this next one. I love the stripe on this one. It's just absolutely beautiful. It is a front closing dress. We have a lovely, very sheer cap done in red with the pink and gray or purple stripes of the dress. She has a neck bow that is the same dress fabric, which is very interesting. I don't know if I've seen that one before. And she has a white shawl. It has a lot of fringe on it. She has a bracelet, not necessarily both of them. And then she has a very plain set of cuffs that look like maybe cufflinks on the sides. And it looks like she made a belt out of her dress fabric and just turned it horizontal instead of vertical, so it kind of has that detail. I think the green one earlier kind of had that same detail. It looks like she used her dress fabric to make a sort of belt. Now we're going to take a look at some photographs and just a little bit of a different take from the paintings. So let's look at these two ladies here. Looks like very nice silk or wool dresses. We have both of them in bonnets that are silk bonnets. One looks to be a plain one. The one on the left, the one on the right has a shirred bonnet. Very fashionable headwear. Bonnet strings are very nice. Of course, we can't see the color at all. The plain bonnet does have some sort of trimming or a cap underneath, whereas the shirred one does not. The lady in the plain bonnet has on just a plain dress. You can see a very nice lace necktie at her neck, because that's not her bonnet strings. You can see her dark bonnet strings. Looks like she has some very fancy shirred or puffed undersleeves that are net or very fine cotton otherwise. Black, what is likely a black mantle, could be red, could be a lot of different colors. Period photography, it's very hard to tell the colors because it depends very much on the light, and things turn out very weird in period photography. They are both wearing gloves. One has dark gloves, the other one has light gloves. So the lady on the right has a very plain bodice. Her bonnet strings are lighter. She has a very beautiful patterned shawl. It could be a nice light cotton shawl, could be another fiber. She has some very nice lace undersleeves as well. And of course, we already talked about her gloves. So this is a group of ladies. So we have two in the back have their bonnets. They have matching bonnet strings and really matching bonnets, which is very nice to see. Plainly set bonnet, could be white, could be a lot of different colors. But you can sort of see the detail in their dresses. Three of them have buttons down the front of their dresses. The one in the middle front does not look like her dress is a front opening dress. It just looks like that's button detail. The other two ladies, it could be opening dresses. It's very unusual to see buttons opening dresses and closing dresses in the 1840s, but not to say it never happens. The two in the back have some sort of shawl or something over top. You can see the pattern of it that is different than the plainness of their dresses. They both still do have cuffs though. The three ladies in the front have some very lovely hair ornaments. They have very small white collars with the little neckties. All of them kind of have that jockey style necktie where it crosses in the front and there's a brooch that holds it together. And we see different styles of bodices. We see a very full bodice, well, a moderately full bodice on the lady on the left. We see a very plainly set bodice on the center lady. You see how high her darts are. That's something we don't often see in reproduction clothing. But part of the illusion of making your waist look long in the 1840s was to have really high darts, so that's something we need to do better as a group of people. And then the other lady, it looks like she has a pattern to her dress. It looks like almost an ombre effect. And I don't know if her dress is a front opening. I'm thinking that's just trim, because you can see sort of a piped detail on the either side of those buttons, and it goes all the way down. But I don't think that's a wrapper. I think it's just her trim. She has a very lightly full bodice as well. Her sleeves are still set on the bias, which would be very typical in this time period. And she has some sort of velvet cuff on her dress, but then also a white cuff underneath. All of the ladies have little white cotton cuffs, very simple cuffs at that. They're very good, middle class or upper. That's a tornado warning. That's a tornado siren. Hang on. It stopped. I'm guessing it was a false alarm. That was a tornado siren. I guess it could have been a test, but that's really mean to do a tornado test in the middle of a storm in tornado season in Tornado Alley. Maybe it was just an accident. Anyway, I don't see a tornado and I don't hear a train coming, which would be what it sounds like when a tornado comes by. So if I start hearing a train, we don't live anywhere near train tracks, so if I hear a train, we'll stop and I'll go into the other room. But we'll just continue. It's fine. Speaking of hairstyles, the two ladies on the front, on the ends, they have split curls, which is a very popular 1840s little thing that they would do. This next lady has a lovely, could be a shirred bonnet. Very pretty. She has little earrings on. Nice wide collar. These could be crochet, they could be lace, they could be embroidered. If you're going to do crochet, just make sure it's a period pattern and in a period weight thread. This is not going to be a yarn at all. It's going to be very fine, like sewing thread weight. And I love her bonnet strings. I know it's really hard to do now because we don't have good silk ribbons anymore in the widths that we need, but I love the patterns that they would have in their silk bonnet ribbons. I think they're just adorable. She has a plaid dress on, which is very popular in the 1840s. They loved plaid. A little brooch on her neckline as well. Looks like a front opening dress, just because I can see her plaid's just a little bit mismatched. She has a dark mantle on that has some ruffles on it, which is really nice to see. Sort of a full sleeve for the 1840s. There's a ruffle on the end of it, but it is a little bit full for what you would typically see in the 1840s. And she has her lovely little net mitts, not crocheted. Those are lace net, and they are popular in the 1840s, and I don't know what she's holding. Next lady looks like she's dressed in silk. She has a very plainly set bonnet. Love the color detail in this one. Her ribbons are blue. Now this is an interesting design. You actually do see, it's a little bit of a fad in the later 1840s, where the bodices were made to clasp at the very top of the throat and also just below the bosoms all the way down to the waist, but then were left open around the bosom. It's the weirdest thing, but you'd wear like you would wear a chemisette underneath, of course. Like that's not her corset, it's not her underwear. That's a chemisette underneath, and you can see the collar on top. So you'd have a chemisette with a collar. You'd pull the collar out because this is a high-necked bodice, but you just leave the bodice open a little bit so you can actually see the detail of the chemisette. So this isn't an unusual photo at all. This is actually quite a popular style that we don't see replicated very much anymore, but I can see why. It's a little bit strange. And also sometimes fitting that can be very difficult just because of body shapes, and you get some very weird open gapes if you are busty. You have to have sort of a slight bust to be able to let it sit correctly and kind of give you that ovular opening, as opposed to just pulling at the bust, which is, if I tried that style, that's what I would look like. So I don't do that style. Her sleeves are a little bit open. She has trimmed her dress with lace, which is very fancy. And she has little cap sleeves, and she has lace on the caps as well as the bottom of the sleeves. And again, little net or lace mitts, likely in black. And what's coming off of her bodice, I'm going to assume that little white string, I'm going to think that's probably her pocket watch chain. Alright, this next lady has a beautiful little bonnet on, little flowers on the inside. So you'll notice in the 1840s, the flowers are only around the cheeks, just about to the ears, and they stop. So you're not doing full trimmings like you see in the 1850s all the way around. So they kind of start just at the cheeks. And she has a very small bonnet string. She's a younger lady. We have a little bit of an open neckline without a chemisette underneath, which would not be uncommon for a younger lady. Beautiful lace bonnet veil. I collect bonnet veil, so it's always really nice to see them in photographs. Very nice fine sheer, either mantle or cloak. Beautiful. She has a bracelet, at least on one arm. Can't see what's going on the other arm. She has what looks to be a couple of rings. With photographs, it can be hard. I know people who have photographed themselves without a ring, but then there is a ring on a finger in a photograph, like in the finished photograph. So period photography can just be weird. But again, we see, but her dress is plaid, and just like what we talked about in our dressmaking video, you can see the fronts of her bodice, the side fronts of her bodice, are cut on the bias, which would be very usual in this time period. But that overlay is cut on the straight. And she has short sleeves because, again, she's a younger lady. She can have short sleeves. That would not be common for married women especially, but really anyone over the age of 25 or anyone who is in society to be an adult, ready to be married. You really wouldn't have the short sleeves. So this is someone whose parents decided she is not ready for that. And I had to show this image because of the parasol. Little folding parasol. It looks like it might have some mother of pearl detail, either bone or ivory finial and little tip. Very beautiful little parasol. All right, this next one I picked just because of the pretty bonnet, because I think it's really nice. You can see the flowers all over the outside. Very beautiful. Very typical hairstyle. She has earrings on. She has a brooch on. Very small collar. That is a watch chain going to her waist. It's all the way down. It looks like she has a very full bodice, but it looks like there's lace across the edges of it, which would be very, again, fancy. She has a single bracelet, and she has little cuffs of white as well. They look a little bit ruffled. There's not a full undersleeve because that is a very tight sleeve, but she does have that. This one looks like she is wearing a ring, and because it is colored in and gilded, I'm going to assume it actually was a ring. And then I love her, again, you see those little ruffles. Those are so cute on the skirt to see the little ruffles. And our final one, here we are with a somewhat open neckline, beautiful lace collar. I don't think that's a front opening dress. I think that's just buttons used as trim, as we've seen before. You can see her whole bodice is cut on the bias. You can see how high her darts are. Again, we should be having some quite high darts. Her little cap sleeves are in 2 layers. So it's a 2-layer cap sleeve and then a longer sleeve. The 2 cap sleeves have a little bit of fringe on them. Very lovely. I also love because it looks like her buttons are not at all evenly spaced, which I think is hilarious. She has a very thin necklace on, fancy hairstyle, especially with that what looks like might be a comb in the back. And again, a plaid, because we can see that her sleeve, and which is nice because we can always see that her bodice and her sleeves are on the bias. So what do we glean from all that? Well, they're all properly dressed in a one-piece dress. So wealthy women would be wearing a chemise, a corset, 2 to 4 petticoats, possibly to include a corded petticoat. That would be very common with this style of outfit. And yes, women are going to be wearing corsets regardless of their age. Very few photographs of women corsetless. And when we talk about how many people there were back then versus how many people are now, I mean, if you've been on the channel long, you know how I talk about my ratios and how we need to be accurately portraying history, even within the rate of things, the rate of how and where things showed up. So corsets do provide bust support, back support, a place to hold the weight of the skirts, etc. Drawers are optional in this time period. I do find their uses isn't as common in America in the 1840s, but they are a thing and you can absolutely wear them. They just, from what I can tell, aren't as normal. And if drawers are being worn, they are going to be split crotch like typical mid-19th century drawers. So one thing I noticed, and I kind of talked about briefly from the illustrations, is that last month with the poor women, we saw a lot of open necklines, and they had kerchiefs to cover up the open neckline. We didn't see that a lot in this month. We saw the ladies who are dressed a little bit nicer who are wearing a lot more higher necklines. And on the lower necklines that we did see, they weren't as low, and they were filled in with usually a very nice sheer chemisette. Those chemisettes are going to have things like lace or white work on them, adding to the value and the expense of the outfit. And again, we're seeing a lot more dresses with cuffs or undersleeves than we were with the lower class dresses. And again, a lot of these can be white work and lace adding to them. But a smartly dressed middle class lady might just have a set of nice cuffs on her dress, not necessarily of lace or white work. Just, something to elevate you a little bit more from the working class working outfit. And these bits of white work are going to be very fine. And we're talking like finer than batiste fabrics, done in very full white work embroidery, similar to heirloom quality white works, but just generally, again, done by hand, because we're still about 5 to 10 years away from getting machine done embroideries in this era. Now, most living historians won't qualm at the idea of subbing machine-done embroideries as long as they are nice and done in 100% cotton, not the low-quality polycotton stuff that you can find at most major stores. Nothing with that little zigzag around the eyelets. That's not going to be appropriate. Lace too, styles come and go, and then not all lace styles are appropriate for the 1840s. And I'm not a lace expert at all. I have a couple books on the subject, but I'm really not well read or well versed in it enough to really date lace very well. So personally, I stick with heirloom quality cotton laces when I can, and then I match them up to originals when I can find originals, just to make sure, okay, this is about the size, this is what the motifs look like, this is how we finish the edge, whether it's a scallop or a Van Dyke, or how that works. Usually laces are going to set fairly plainly, so they're not going to be super ruffled, kind of nice and subdued, like the 1840s are generally. And since we've already started talking about fabrics, let's discuss fabrics a little bit further. So most of the fabrics we saw in the paintings are solids, but we also saw, plaids and stripes and that sort of thing. Now again, we discussed before that cotton is not dyed a single color except for like linings and that sort of thing. So you won't find dresses in solid cottons. The solids are going to be silks and wools, a blend of silk and wool, or I have seen some solids that were wool cotton blends. So if you want a solid dress, it doesn't need to be silk or wool. But since we're talking about being fancy anyway, that would make sense. When you look at accent dresses, you see a lot of very fun designs and prints and plaids in some crazy colors too, which is always a lot of fun. Wools especially could be very nicely printed, and there are some wild fabrics as we learned in our fabric video a few months ago. Silks again do come in solids, so do wools. Silks again we saw could be shot or changeable. They can also be brocaded or embroidered. There are so many good options. So another note is that again, not all women had their hair covered. Interior head coverings, when worn, would consist of caps, and we saw how fine and detailed and lovely those are, with lots of silk ribbons, lots of lace, lots of embroidery. Those are very nicely done and typically nice expensive accessories. And then exterior head coverings could be things like fashion bonnets in silk and straw. Most of these are still going to be very plain in their decorations, but even a middle or upper class woman could wear a sunbonnet if she chose to. These would likely be a sheer cotton or a sheer linen, usually in white, and those are very nice, set apart, lovely accessories, honestly. Of course, in fashion bonnets, we saw things like feathers and ribbons, really fun ribbons, florals, and if you're doing any interior trimmings, it just needs to be at the cheeks. So if you're looking to build a wealthier impression or a wardrobe, let's talk about how to build that. Stockings were generally in solid colors. That's going to be easiest to keep clean, but colors are totally an option. You can do really whatever color you want. White's going to be the most popular. It looks the neatest, and it's easiest to keep clean. So stockings for upper class are going to be cotton, wool, or silk, occasionally in linen, but usually it's going to be those three fibers. Shoes should have squared toes and no or a very slight heel. We're talking like 1/4 of an inch or so. Uppers can be fabric, which would generally be wool, sometimes velvet or silk. And then they can have foxing, which is a little leather bit at the toe and at the heel. Shoes can lace up the sides or the front. And then of course we always have little slippers as well, which would not have any closures at all. Slippers are very nice for wealthy and middle class because you can't really do a lot of heavy work in them, so they just kind of give off an air of money or wealth. Chemises are very important. You're going to want either cotton or linen or a blend of the two fibers. They need to be white, not cream, not ecru, not off-white. They need to be like printer paper white. You can choose finer fabrics like batiste for wealthy class, and white work would not be unusual. I would steer clear of laces, especially for underwear. You want your laces to be washable. Now for super wealthy people, they didn't care. You put lace on your underwear all you want if you are super wealthy, because they didn't care the fact that it was going to wear out, because they could just go buy more. And so on trousseau list and clothing list for super wealthy people, you'll see things like lace trimmed chemises, which is not something you see in like the middle classes or below. They're going to be more concerned about their clothes lasting and their trims lasting. So you want a washable trim, which a white work would fit into. Again, drawers are optional, especially here in America. I think in England, they really, as far as I can tell, are not as optional. So if you're across the pond, I would suggest probably wearing some more drawers. And again, we talked about at least 2 petticoats. You really should be wearing at least 3. So a corded petticoat is nice. And the layers should be, you should have a petticoat underneath, the corded petticoat, and then usually there's a petticoat over top of that as well. And petticoats can have tucks on them. They can be made of ruffles. For winter, you could have a a wool flannel or a silk quilted petticoat. Those are really nice and kind of fancy. And I've seen a couple of petticoats with tucks and like a ruffle or two at the bottom. None of those like tiered petticoats like with multiple ruffles. That doesn't seem to be a thing that I can tell. It's someone, if you know of originals that are like that, I would love to see them, because I think that's a really great way to get that boofiness in the skirt without having to wear a lot of layers. So if anyone's aware of any originals, would love to hear about that one. And your dress for a more wealthy woman, either middle class or upper class, is going to be like a fine sheer cotton, maybe a nice cotton print, but mostly it's going to be silks and wools and very sheer fine fabrics. And again, you can go with some very bold fabrics for this era. If you're wearing a lower neckline, definitely consider filling that with a chemisette. If you have a high neckline, you can always do a collar. We saw a lot of ladies with little silk neckties. It's a great option to add. And you just add a different pop of color that just coordinates with something else, but adds a little bit more detail to your outfit as well. Usually closed again with a little brooch. For outerwear, shawls are fantastic. 2 yards of a plain or plaid or striped wool fringe at the ends makes a perfect shawl that also works for working class. We saw a lot of mantles in this time period. Most of those are going to be silk, sometimes lined and polished cotton. They could have fringe. They could have fringe on them, like silk fringe on them. They could have lace on the edge, which would be very fancy. Again, black is a really good color for accessories for middle class because it goes with a variety of outfits. But the wealthier you are, the more apt you're going to have certain accessories with different outfits, and you can have like all sorts of crazy colors. But again, we shouldn't necessarily be matching our outfits. We should be coordinating colors, not necessarily matching. If you're a little bit older, if you want to hide your hair, cap would be excellent. We're looking for very fine, very sheer materials, trimmed with lots of lace. We could do some white work. We can do silk ribbons. All of that's an option. None of that Walmart grosgrain or satin ribbon, none of that's going to look right. You do need real silk ribbon for this. Hair, again, it's going to be a bun, usually in the middle of the head. Sometimes upper middle would be very common. You could have like a comb sitting on top. We saw a lot of ladies with a little comb detail. The frontal bits can be braided, as we saw. We saw a lot of them with just some fullness over the ears and then pulled back. That would be very common. You can wear, again, brooches. You have necklaces. There are bracelets. There are rings. There are earrings. None of which I have time really to go into this video, but all of that's going to be a great way to make an outfit look a little bit fancier and a little bit more wealthier. Headwear is going to consist of mostly straw or silk bonnets for this time period. If it's cold, of course, you can always go for a silk winter hood. That's fine too. And if you're wearing a bonnet, as you should, and it's not a sunbonnet, you should be wearing a parasol as well. Unfortunately, no one makes period parasols. You have to find an original that you can get recovered. You're looking for one with a little bit of a wider canopy, about 25 to maybe 29 inches in diameter. Green, blue, and brown are super popular colors. Parasols tend to be a little bit plainer, a lot with no trim whatsoever, and then some with very short fringe, about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. That's going to be common. Finials can be very long. We're talking 3 to 5 inch finials. If you have fringe, it's not only going to be at the bottom of the canopy, it's going to be at the top where the finial is. Long finials, they can be very highly carved, decorated, bone, ivory, that sort of thing. I've seen a couple metal ones. Folding parasols, really awesome. They have straight long parasols as well, just for like walking and that sort of thing. Folding ones are going to be great for like carriage and traveling. So this is where your fabrics really get to shine, because the styles of dresses don't really change. You get to change your fabric and your trims, and that's what's going to elevate your outfit to something very wealthier than, say, a working class outfit. So your wealth is really going to be in the fabrics you choose. Nice, rich silks, changeable silks, all sorts of silks, wools, especially in prints and solids and stripes and plaids, all that sort of fun stuff. And your accessories are really where you can elevate an outfit. Lace and white work can be invaluable in elevating that outfit to something from, okay, maybe it's upper working class, to like, oh, this is solidly middle class, or oh, this is even wealthier. And of course your accessories as well, and how you choose to wear jewelry, and how you choose and what colors you choose for like your mantle versus a shawl, and of course your lace, your musettes, and your lace cuffs and all of that. If you've enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe to the channel, click that little bell notification so you're notified anytime I upload a new video. And as always, have a fantastic week, and I'll see you back here in the next video.